Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Doug Bishop. Welcome to tonight's forum for the Illinois 1st Congressional District Democratic primary candidates. Before we begin tonight, I have just a couple of brief announcements. First, we'd like to thank the clergy, staff, and parishioners of the First Unitarian Church for providing this magnificent space for our meeting. We couldn't do this without their generosity. We also ask that you show your gratitude to and respect for the church by making sure that you collect everything that you brought it with you and take it out when you leave. Thanks. If you are a social media person and you're planning to tweet about tonight's event, will you please use the hashtag ICSSmeet as written on our sign here, and that would be great. Okay, we're proud to bring you this event tonight. It's intended to be a service to the community. We're an activist group working to promote progressive values at all levels of government. If you'd like to find more about what we're up to, there'll be an information table on the right side of the back of the church, and you can stop by and talk to one of our representatives, and they'll be happy to tell you what opportunities we can provide if you want to do something about things like who's in the White House right now. Would you please silence your cell phones? And I'll tell you that tonight's proceedings are being streamed live on Facebook and are also being recorded for a future broadcast by CAN TV. So I'll now turn the floor over to my co-leader, Esther Peters, who is tonight's moderator.
Thank you, Doug. It's always difficult to have differing height sizes and co-leaders. So there we go. So as Doug said, my name is Esther Peters. I am a co-leader of Indivisible Chicago Southside, and I will be serving as moderator. I want to begin with a few notes on the format for the forum so everyone is aware of how we will proceed. I promise I will be as brief as possible. Via an online form, we collected proposed questions from the public and then selected questions representing the most widespread community concerns. Whenever possible, the author of the question is here to present the question to the candidates directly. When not, the moderator, me, will read the question. As to the format of the forum itself, we will begin with opening statements from each candidate. The statements will be no more than 5 minutes. Then we will move on to the question rounds. Each candidate will be given 1 minute to answer the question. Should a candidate be criticized directly by another candidate during the question round, they will be given 30 seconds to respond once everyone has had a chance to answer. The order in which candidates will answer the question will rotate from round to round. Each candidate will have a final 30 seconds for closing statements following all of the questions. We have selected 10 questions and we hope to have time for all of them. We ask everyone in the audience to remain quiet so that all the candidates can make the best case to any undecided voters in the room, as well as those who will be viewing the recording and watching the Facebook live stream. We also ask the candidates to take the time constraints for their answers and responses seriously. With that done, Indivisible Chicago Southside thanks everyone for coming and welcomes all the candidates for Congress in Illinois' 1st District. Unfortunately, Dr. Amina Matthews is ill and won't be able to participate in tonight's forum. Before we get started with opening statements, I'd like to invite Dr. LaShawn Latrice, her campaign manager, to come up and give a brief statement. Thank you.
Good evening, you all. I just want to offer our apologies. We were very excited about this debate, working on it for the last couple of months with Doug and Indivisible Chicago. However, unforeseen circumstances have caused Dr. Matthews not to be able to attend tonight. This has been a rough week for her. We are just praying that her illness passes, and she sends her love and her thanks and appreciation for being included in this forum. Thank you all so much.
So we will start with Congressman Rush, followed by Robert Emmons Jr., and then Sarah Gadd to close out the opening statements. Congressman Rush?
Good evening. I am so delighted to be here at this forum for with Indivisible. Indivisible and I had a raucous introduction to one another, but we smoothed that out, and I salute your involvement and your concern. I also would want to express my prayers and my wishes for the well-being of Amina. Tell her we missed her yesterday, we missed her today, and hurry up and get well and join us on this campaign trail. And I want to thank each and every one of the participants for coming out tonight. Your presence here really indicates your civic interest, your civic involvement, and your concern about the welfare not only of the district, but of the city, state, and of the nation. I probably don't need to introduce myself in a formal kind of way. I've been around for a period of time, but yesterday in the Sun-Times hearing, my opponents here in the race, my other fine friends, these fine young people, they made an issue of their age. One said he was 27, and another one said she was 30. Well, as I reflect back, when I was 27, I had raised a family, or was raised in a family. I had been honorably discharged fighting for my nation in the U.S. Army, where I served 4 years, 7 months, and 28 days, and I wasn't really counting. I got involved in the independent political movement. My first candidate that I supported back in the day was Anna Langford when she was running for alderman on the 16th Ward both times. And then I supported Bill Cousins when he ran for alderman of the 8th Ward. I supported State Senator Newhouse when he ran. I supported Harold Washington both times when he ran for state rep, and also for state senator. I supported Carol Brown when she first ran. So I've cut my teeth in terms of supporting independent candidates for office. So I am just delighted to be here. When by the time I was 27, I was in leading one of the leaders of the election to defeat Edward Henry Hand. I had organized a free medical center. I had given out on a daily basis thousands of free breakfasts for hungry children before they went to school. So my life have been a life that have been inclusive, have been involved. My activism has not been from behind. It's been in front. I've been in the forefront of leadership on so many issues and so many fights here in the city of Chicago, from the Willis wagons to the war against Vietnam. I've been involved in all these battles. So at 27, I had planted seeds. At 30, I had planted seeds. And now I'm 3 plus 70. And I'm still planting seeds and still as active as I've ever been and work as hard as I've ever worked. And achieving and accomplishing as many things as I, in a remarkable way. I am running for re-election. Why? Because I'm having a great time. I'm having great accomplishments. And I really enjoy what I do. And I'm strategically positioned to get things done in the Congress. The Democrats are in control of the House now for less than a year. And look what we've done in less than a year in terms of being in control of the House. We have impeached Donald Trump. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Indivisible, for having me. Thank you to all of you who are out here participating in democracy. It's a beautiful thing. I want to give a shout out to my parents, Michelle and Robert Sr. for supporting me and loving me throughout this journey. My wife, Brittany, sends her love. She's not feeling so well. And I would also like to send my love and respect to Dr. Matthews. No, she's not feeling well. Her and I talked earlier, and we need her voice, we need her fight in this election. My name is Robert Emmons Jr. I'm from Auburn Gresham on the south side of Chicago. I went to high school on 81st and May, which is the old Calumet, then formerly Perspectives. I'm a social innovator, which essentially just means I design innovative ways to solve social problems. And I've done that in the environmental justice space, I've done that in the education space, I've done that in sustainable cities and development. I'm also a gun violence prevention organizer, so I've worked bringing young people from around the country to solve the issue of gun violence. I'm a nonprofit leader. I've worked with an organization by the name of Unleash, which brings together 1,000 young people from around the world dedicated to solving the world's most pressing issues. I also worked as a community leader with the Obama Foundation, again, bringing together young people from around the country to solve our community's most pressing needs. And I'm running for U.S. Congress in the Illinois 1st Congressional District to help make this the very last generation to be faced with everyday gun violence. And I come to this issue as someone who's passionate about ending everyday gun violence and also someone who has experienced gun violence firsthand. So like I said, I went to high school on the south side of Chicago on 81st and May, the old Calumet. And I did so with some of the most resilient individuals that I'd ever had the fortune of meeting. Three of us got into the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign back in 2011. And we decided we were going to room together our freshman year. And that's where our lives began to fork off a little bit. As I became heavily involved in advocacy, fighting for criminal justice reform, gun violence prevention, increasing the minimum wage to a living wage, one of my friends, he struggled at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And within 6 months of being at the University of Illinois, he received what's called an academic probation letter, stating that if he didn't get his act together, he would unfortunately be kicked out. So despite his best efforts to bring up his performance, he was kicked out of the university. Now again, being the resilient person that he was, he decided he was going to stick it out. And he enrolled in our sister college down in Urbana-Champaign by the name of Parkland. And when he enrolled in Parkland and he attended Parkland, he experienced even more barriers and more obstacles in our society. And he struggled to pay for books. He struggled to feed himself. So he did what some of our young people do all around the country in disinvested communities. He turned to illegal activity in an effort to support himself. Now that illegal activity eventually caught up to him, and he had his first interaction with the criminal justice system. And he was forced to come back to Chicago. And when he came back to Chicago, he fell deeper and deeper into poverty. And he turned right back into the same things he was doing back in Urbana-Champaign. And within a few years, he was shot and killed. Now, the thing that made me the most upset about this is that, as unfortunate as it was, statistically speaking, it was predictable. And it was predictable because he was living in a society that failed him at every single turn. Our economic system that allowed him to fall deeper and deeper and deeper into poverty, it failed him. Our education system that did not provide him with an adequate amount of resources to be successful, it failed him. Our criminal justice system, which quite frankly is racist, it failed him. Instead of being rehabilitative, it was punitive. And I'm running for U.S. Congress because, as statistically speaking, his murder was predictable. It was also 100% preventable. And preventable with a living wage. It's preventable with making sure that every single person in this country has guaranteed access to health care and mental health care. It's preventable with reversing the viciousness of environmental racism. It's preventable with universal pre-K and access to transportation. So that's why I'm running for U.S. Congress. I'm running for U.S. Congress to get the federal government to understand that that is how we end everyday gun violence once and for all, and doing so sustainably. Now, we can't trust congressmen who take money from corporations and the fossil fuel industry to deliver on these solutions. Our campaign isn't taking $1 from any corporation. Our campaign isn't taking any money from the fossil fuel industry, and that's how we get a Green New Deal passed. That's how we get Medicare for all passed. And I thank you so much for you fueling us. And I thank you so much for your resiliency, for your spirit. And I know that's going to help us win this election come March 17, 2020. And we're going to win big. So thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Gadd. I want to thank the Indivisible Chicago Forum for putting together this debate as a means to help inform the voters of the 1st Congressional District. Roughly 1 year ago, I was approached by members of the 1st Congressional District about the prospect of running for Congress. They felt that my personal experiences, my community activism, and my excuse me. They saw me as someone who can affect positive change instead of just talking about it. And I have a passion for affecting positive change in my community because I, like many of us, have been discounted as one of the down and out. 7 years ago, I was languishing in a jail cell in the Cook County Jail. I had been beaten, raped, and stabbed, all with the complicity of the correctional officers. When I was being wheeled down to medical, I remembered overhearing a correctional officer talking about how she had made over $100,000 that year with overtime pay. I didn't think much of it then, but that's something that crosses my mind a lot now when I think about the disparities and how we pay people who have more important jobs in society, such as teachers, who are tasked with educating future generations. When I was released from jail, the punishment only continued. I couldn't find a job or a place to live. I was unable to apply for Section 8 housing because I had a nonviolent drug offense on my record. I couldn't even apply for student aid for the very same reason. I was stigmatized for the experience of being locked in a cage pursuant to a disease, and I was denied health care and a way to live. I found myself stuck in a system, in a horrific situation that I could not escape, and I knew that I wasn't alone. Everybody around me seemed to be fighting the same battle. And I finally got to a point where I decided something has to change. And if it's not going to be me, then who? And if it's not going to be now, then when? So I went to law school. And I went to law school to learn how to use law and policy to change society for the better, to empower those who've made mistakes to keep pushing forward instead of being left behind like I was, and to ensure that those who harm us are held accountable, regardless of what uniform they're in. I'm now proud to say that I represent Southside youth and young adult offenders for free through my law school's legal aid clinic in the exact same courtroom that I was handcuffed and shackled in 8 years ago. And when I confronted the judge and told him who I was, it drained the blood from his face. It drained the blood from his face to see a defendant who had left his courtroom come back successful 7 years later. And that said to me, there is a big problem here with our criminal justice system. When we have a sitting judge who is sitting at the top tier of our criminal justice system, who is tasked with administering justice and rehabilitating people, literally shocked to see somebody come back successful. Studying law in the context of my personal experiences has taught me there is a massive disconnect between who we are supposed to be as a nation and what we actually are. America is supposed to be grounded on 3 core principles: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Ironically enough, those 3 values have been eroded by the very institutions who are supposed to be tasked with upholding them. We have waged a war on human life through this drug war. It is the most failed policy of all time, yet we keep fighting it. We've accepted a horrifically high death count in the name of keeping America drug-free, which we have neither done nor will we ever be able to do. And it's time for us to just cut our losses, exit this drug war, and make harm reduction the cornerstone of US policy, because there has not been a single year that has gone by since 2014 where I haven't gotten a phone call that somebody that I know and I once loved has died of an overdose. All this drug war has done is sparked a harmful legacy of mass incarceration that is draining our budgets and the amount that we're able to appropriate to things that matter, like education, healthcare, employing people, giving the homeless permanent supportive housing. So I have been picking up the government slack for the last 6 years. I started an organization called Jacket Change, which is a mobile coat drive for the homeless. I started an organization called Addiction to Action, which brings life-saving treatment for opioid addiction to jails and prisons. I have to admit, when I was approached about running for Congress, I was skeptical. So I went to Congress for the summer. I took an internship with the DEA, or with the Drug Policy Alliance, the DPA. and I attended dozens of congressional hearings. Everything from reparations to restoring access to Pell Grants in correctional facilities. And I found that there was a huge absence in leadership. And at the end of the day, I was the one doing the advocating on behalf of our district. I'm running for Congress because I envision an America where education is valued over throwing people in cages. Can I just say one more thing? Where the disease of addiction is treated as a public health issue and not a crime, and where education and healthcare are basic rights, ones that are taken more seriously than the right to own a firearm. I'm running for Congress because if our legislators are constantly absent from Washington, then the privileged will be empowered to continue to label, define us, and keep us sidelined. We need a voice that is present in Washington 100% of the time, and we don't have that right now. We need somebody who's going to be in the room when it comes to decide who gets what, and to make sure that we have a say, that when policies are passed that affect us, that we have a say. We're ready, we've been ready, now it's finally coming, and my name is Sarah Gadd, and it will be my honor to represent the 1st Congressional District.
Thank you. We're going to start with the first question that I'll be reading that was submitted by a community member. And the order for this round will be Sarah Gadd, Bobby Rush, and then Robert Emmons. The question is, what is your plan to address the economic disparities that exist between the north side as compared to the west and south sides of Chicago?
First, we have to create access to jobs and create access to transportation for people to actually reach those jobs. So I think that we need to invest in public transportation, but we also have to look at what's keeping people from getting jobs in the first place. One of the major reasons why here in the south side of Chicago people are unable to find employment is because we have a system of law enforcement that disproportionately targets people of color, stamps them with records, and leaves them permanently marginalized, unable to find work, housing, or reintegrate back into society in any sort of meaningful way. So one thing that I would do is ameliorate the collateral consequences that accompany criminal records so that people can leave the system and actually rebuild their life without impediment. I would also support bringing reparations to the south side of Chicago because it's going to take a lot more than just jobs to rectify the economic imbalances resulting from slavery, Jim Crow, not to mention modern day slavery and the new Jim Crow.
Thank you.
Jobs and economic development is the most critical issue that we are concerned with and that we are facing. And jobs and economic development has been at the forefront of my tenure as your congressman since I was elected. When I was first elected to office, there was some who asked me to be on the Education and Labor Committee, which is the committee that my predecessor was on. Well, I decided that I would not do that because I wanted to look at a new approach to creating jobs. I wanted to look at the commerce. Why don't we have a vibrant commerce in the 1st Congressional District? Why don't we have more black-owned businesses in the 1st Congressional District? Why are black banks diminished almost to being non-existent in the 1st Congressional District? And frankly, it was because of disinvestment. Frankly, it's because a number of federal policies that existed. And so I went to work. Not only have I gone to work on a wholesale level, being a member of Congress, being on the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is one of the most powerful committees in Congress, where we have jurisdiction over a number of different issues. But I also brought corporations and business into the district through the venue of jobs fair. We had a number of jobs fair in Chicago.
Thank you.
Some individuals who were hired.
Thank you very much.
This is a great question, and when I hear it, I feel it on a real level. As I was going around the district, before I even decided I was going to run for Congress back in January, that's the #1 issue that popped up was not having access to upward mobility. So I too am in favor of universal transportation, because as we know, as we expand transportation in disinvestment communities, we spur economic development. I'm also a strong proponent of reparations, and not just reparations, the adoption of it, but making sure that we alleviate the debt of the Black community so we can actually ascertain upward mobility in a sustainable way so that our grandkids, our great-grandkids aren't having to have the same fights that we have here in this time right now. So that's what we could do to decrease the racial wealth gap within our lifetime.
Thank you very much. The second question was submitted by Judy Weiss, a longtime healthcare activist who is grateful to be on Medicare. Here you go.
Thank you all for being here tonight. I just want to ask very simply, will you pledge not only to co-sponsor, but to actively work to pass true improved Medicare for all, as embodied in Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal's House Bill 1384? If no, why not? And if yes, please tell us what you plan to do in support of the bill, and please be concrete and specific on that. Thanks.
Thank you. In this round, we'll start with Congressman Rush.
I'm the proud co-sponsor of H.R. 1384 and have been proud to co-sponsor legislation that enacts Medicare for all every year since 2005. And I've also introduced and supported other bills to lower health care costs, such as H.R. 1499, the Protecting Consumer Access to Generic Drugs Act. And I also have been, since 1997, a co-sponsor of the Reparations bill in the Congress.
Robert, yes.
This is another issue that's deeply personal to me, and I want to put it in perspective because I know we throw a lot of stats around all the time. But 40,000 Americans are killed due to preventable causes. Only if they had health care, they would have been able to survive. 650,000 Americans per year go bankrupt due to medical-related issues. So absolutely, I will support Medicare for all, and I'm so proud to have received the endorsement from Demand Universal Health Care, because this is one of the biggest issues of our time. We have people across the district that are cutting their insulin and sharing it with their grandkids. That's an injustice in and of itself. And with the wealthiest country to have ever existed, we can do a lot better. And that's what we're going to do when we're elected into Congress. Thank you.
So I didn't mention this in my opening speech, but I actually was in medical school for 3 years. I was in medical school when I got into a car accident that derailed my life off course. And that's when my addiction and my incarceration and the injuries and trauma that followed ensued. And so I've personally experienced life without access to health care, and it's a living nightmare. I believe that health care should be a human right, not a commodity or a bargaining chip. I support the goal of providing Medicare for all and ultimately advancing towards a single-payer healthcare system. However, I believe that the current ways in which Medicare for all is being proposed is not feasible. I think it doesn't actually take into account what Medicare really is and why many doctors don't actually accept Medicare. I think that the move towards a single-payer healthcare system has to take place in concert with other measures that are going to increase the efficiency of healthcare, like expanding the capacity of primary care doctors, rewarding patients for taking active steps to prevent chronic disease down the line, but also ramping up preventative healthcare measures like cleaning up our environment and re-empowering the FDA and the EPA to monitor our food and environment, respectively. I also think that we have to fundamentally restructure the way in which we bill healthcare services and veer away from discrete billing practices and moving towards more holistic practices that are already actually incorporated into the ACA that many aren't aware of. So we also have to veer away from...
Thank you. Our third question, thank you. The next question comes from Valerie Burgess from Moms Demand Action.
Hi, as she said, I'm from Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. I'm also a gun violence survivor, And so I'm here in that capacity more than anything because my son was shot and killed 6 years ago on the south side, about 2 miles away from here. So my question is, what are your proposals for ways to reduce gun violence, and how do you propose to tackle those legislatively?
Rush first.
You go first, yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Valerie, for that question. Ending everyday gun violence within a generation is our number one focus on this campaign. I know what it feels like to walk to school and be afraid of not making it to school or walking from school back home. 100,000 Americans per year are either killed or wounded by guns. In the next 10 years, that's 1 million Americans that will have been directly impacted by gun violence. And that's not to mention the families like Valerie that will have been forever impacted. So to reduce gun violence or end gun violence, we have to repeal the Dickey Amendment, which prevents the Centers for Disease and Control from even studying gun violence as a public health epidemic. Next, we need to allocate funding to go directly to community-based organizations that are already doing the work on the ground to end everyday gun violence. And then lastly, we need to pass progressive policies like Medicare for All, which will ensure that our young people that are dealing with compounded post-traumatic stress disorder has guaranteed access to mental health care. We need a Green New Deal because that's how we reverse the impacts of environmental racism and get the lead out of our drinking water so our young people have an opportunity to have their brains developed. We need to invest in education, universal pre-K, and spur economic development once and for all. We need reparations. We need more. We need more and more. It's time to end everyday gun violence once and for all.
So what I found over the years, just studying law and representing people in the criminal justice system, is that there is an intimate relationship between gun violence and lack of opportunity. So I think that one of the things that we really need to address is the way in which our criminal justice system treats violent offenders. I think that we need to make it such that anybody who's in the criminal justice system can leave jail or prison and be able to rebuild their life without any sort of structural impediments and be able to reintegrate back into society in a meaningful way. One study by the RAND Corporation found that restoring access to Pell Grants or higher education in correctional facilities brings down violent crime and recidivism by 44%. So just by creating a pathway to success for people who've been in the criminal justice system has the potential to tremendously reduce violent crime. I also think that we need to demilitarize law enforcement and look at the role that law enforcement plays when it comes to gun violence. We have DEA agents doing SWAT raids, serving nonviolent drug warrants by knocking down doors and pointing machine guns in people's faces. We also have to pass common sense gun safety legislation that includes things like universal background checks, mandatory mental health assessments, implementing a buyback program, and reinstating the federal assault ban. I mean, there's no reason why any civilian should be walking around with a federal assault rifle in hand.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. On the area of healthcare, over the last 12 years, I founded FQHC in the Inglewood community, one of the few FQHC federally qualified health centers in the Inglewood, in the city rather, in the Inglewood community. And we have about 9,000 visits per year there at the beloved community family wellness center. On the issue of gun violence, Robert, we've already taken care of and we removed that prohibition from disallowing government agencies to investigate, to research gun violence. That was approved. We got rid of that in the appropriations bill, this last appropriations bill. So don't worry about that. It's already taken care of, all right? Addressing gun violence requires looking at a combination of violence prevention, access to well-paying jobs, and increased educational opportunities. I've convened a historic congressional hearing at Kennedy King during the month of December to examine gun violence as a public health issue. I think we've got to look at gun violence from a different perspective. It's a public health issue, and the federal government needs to undertake activities and dedicate funds because it is a public health issue.
Thank you. Robert, you can have it. Yes. 30 seconds.
Thank you so much for calling that out, Representative Rush. I will talk briefly about that public health epidemic panel that you had back in Kennedy King, in which the average age was close to 45 years old. Though gun violence disproportionately impacts young people. A group of young people walked out of that public hearing, and I had to chase them to make sure they talked to the media so we can talk. So in order to solve gun violence, we need the actual user at the table, Congressman Rush.
I'm not responsible for their age. I'm not responsible for their age. They were sitting members of Congress who have a vote to eliminate gun violence in this nation.
Just really quickly, I'm referring to the actual panelists themselves.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next question is from Deja Powell, an organizer with the Sunrise Movement Chicago Hub.
Hello. So as you all may know, climate change is real and it's now. Can the district count on you to champion a Green New Deal in 2021? If yes, how? If no, why not?
Thank you. We'll start with Sarah this time. Sarah, go ahead.
Yes, I would fully support comprehensive climate change legislation like the Green New Deal. This is an issue that's particularly relevant to the 1st Congressional District. We are so burdened by toxic air pollution here in the south side of Chicago that a child is 8 times more likely to die of asthma here than anywhere else in the state. And I know that Congressman Rush sits on the Energy Committee, but I'm not sure why there haven't been more affirmative steps taken to reduce toxic air pollution here in the 1st Congressional District. Here in Illinois in particular, one of the largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions are actually vehicles. So this brings me back to public transit. So not only does investing in public transit increase opportunities for economic growth and development, but it also has huge environmental benefits as well. I would also propose adding minivans, SUVs, and trucks to the guzzler's gas tax. Oh, really? Well, is my time up? Okay, well, I would also propose reducing agricultural emissions by banning new factory farms from opening and refusing to expand existing ones. I think that we need to divest from the meat and dairy industry altogether because that is a huge contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. So those are a few things that I would do to address toxic air pollution in Congress in addition to supporting the Green New Deal.
Thank you. Congressman Rush?
Yeah, I am a supporter of the Green New Deal philosophically, but to me it's just that, it's a philosophy. I still don't know the details of it. I'm more interested in supporting real legislation like the bill that I introduced in Congress, the Clean Future Act. And I also supported the HR 1315, the Blue Collar to Green Collar Jobs Development Act, and HR 5545, which is the new opportunities to expand healthy air using sustainable transportation, the No Exhaust Act of 2020. This act is very important. We're going to be faced with, and it's a good thing in terms of clean air, is we're going to face electric vehicles. And we have to prepare for electric vehicles now. They're already, it's a reality, they're going to be here. And my bill helps to do more research, helps to expand the infrastructure, and also make a way, this green economy has to be a job producing economy. And we have to look at it from an economic development perspective, and that's the perspective that I look at it from.
Our campaign is happy and was honored to have received the endorsement from both Sunrise Chicago and the Sunrise National Movement. And I will call out the fact that the congressman called the Green New Deal a smash and grab, as was quoted in the Intercept article. But this should come to no surprise of the people of the 1st Congressional District, because the congressman has also taken $540,000 from the fossil fuel industry throughout his tenure. So we can't trust a person that taken money from the very industry that has disproportionately impacted Black and brown communities to deliver on the Green New Deal. The congressman also, in reference to the Clean Air Act, says that we have until 2050 to move to a place in which we're carbon neutral. We don't have that time. The congressman will be 102 years old, and hopefully, and I'm sure he would hope to still be running for Congress by then. But we don't have until 2050, Congressman. We have until 2030 to completely overhaul our system and clean up our air and water.
Congressman, yes.
Well, I mean, you'll be 57. And that's not too old, man. 30, take it from me. 30 years come awfully quick, all right? So don't worry about it. But from a realistic point of view, you're not gonna have carbon-free in 10 years. You're not gonna have that. It takes time. A hit on the economy will be totally disruptive if you don't take time to figure this thing out. And 2050 is a realistic point of view. 2030, 2031 is a pipe dream, and it won't get done legislatively. Let me also say this. You know, I've been in Congress.
Sorry, yes, we ran out of time. I apologize.
Can I finish the sentence?
One sentence, yes.
Right.
Finish your sentence.
For 27 years. And for 20 of those 27 years, the Republicans have been in control. For 20 of my 27 years in Congress, the Republicans have been in control of the Congress. A Green New Deal will not pass out of the Congress under this current setup. We need a Democratic House, Senate, and a Democratic President.
Thank you. Our next question is from Yolanda Butler, a representative from STOP, Southside Together Organizing for Power. She's also on the board for the National Alliance of HUD Tenants.
Good evening to all. Do you support the National Alliance of HUD Tenants platform, such as, such as agreeing to support housing as a human right by supporting Maxine Waters' bill to end homelessness in America? And will you extend funding for HUD programs? How do you plan to move it forward?
I'm going off of what Congressman Rush said. We need a new president because our current president is who slashed funding for HUD almost in half. I think that housing should be a human right, and to that end, we need to enforce policies that will keep people in their homes rather than evicting them and leaving them out on the street homeless. I believe that we need to do more to empower federal, state, and local governments to fully enforce the Fair Housing Act, to appropriate more funding to fair housing initiative programs, revive the urban development and Office of the Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity, and also fully reinstate the affirmative furthering Fair Housing Act. We need to pass legislation that ties the hands of the executive branch from being able to slash funding for life-sustaining programs like HUD, but I would propose taking it one step further and passing legislation like Housing First. It's a program that they adopted in Finland that provides people who are homeless with permanent supportive housing, and the program, it basically just gives people who are on the street shelter without any prerequisites or pre-qualifications. It helps them get back on their feet and helps them get jobs, and it's worked for 4 to 5 people in the program, and it actually costs a heck of a lot less than actually dealing with the homelessness problem that we have right now. Right now, we have people who are homeless seeking shelter in county jails. It costs $11,000 to put somebody in an affordable housing unit. It costs $40,000 to put them in a jail cell. It's coming out of your tax money. So where would you rather see that tax money go? To putting people in permanent supportive housing or putting them in a jail cell?
Thank you. Congressman Rush?
I do support this, but again, I want to just let my friends here at the dais know and let everybody here know. So, and we passed over 400 bills during this session of the Congress. 275 of those bills were bipartisan, but they can't get into the Senate. Mitch McConnell holds all those bills. He won't pass any legislation now. So no matter what we say, until we take the House, take the Senate back, until we take the White House back, we're not going to, all the good ideas we may have, they got to go through the Senate and be signed into law by the president. We will not be able to get anything done as long as they control the Senate and as long as they control the White House. I have been working with HUD and with public housing tenants since I've been in, even before I was elected alderman and a member of the Chicago City Council. I go way back to Arsenio Randolph during the days when she was president of the Central Advisory Council. So we've been fighting on the forefront of fighting for housing, for public housing, and for better housing in Chicago for our public housing residents.
Thank you.
We 100% support the National Alliance of HUD Tenants platform. I'll use a personal anecdote just to kind of go over how real this problem is. Me and my wife, after graduating from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, moved to Hyde Park. And over the course of 2 years, our rent skyrocketed $100 each year. This is a problem in our community because as we see development coming, oftentimes that comes with displacement. And when we support the tenants' rights, we can have development without displacement. So I 100% support a federal housing guarantee, and I 100% federal rent control to make sure that our communities stay strong. In addition to that, I also support reparations so we can actually ascertain upward mobility in a sustainable way. And our plan, again, it includes actually alleviating the debt caused by the inequities in our housing market, Black and brown young people being disproportionately impacted by it.
Thank you. So this next question was submitted by a community member, and I will read. The first part for Congressman Rush. How does your work on the Committee of Energy and Commerce help you to serve the constituents of the 1st District? And for the challengers, which committee assignments would you seek to best serve the constituents of the 1st District? And how do you feel your service on those committees would serve the district? So we'll start with Congressman Rush.
Yeah, I forgot on the last question, I forgot to add that I'm a former resident of public housing. I lived in the Hilliard Center right after I was discharged, honorably discharged from the service. And how did my work on the energy, look, every time I sit on that committee, they know that I'm gonna come and ask the black question. I'm gonna ask the people who are before me, what are you doing in the African American community? What are you doing to give African American contracts or African Americans on the board of your corporation or African Americans in your association? My reason for being on that committee is one reason only, to make that committee respond to the issues of the African American community, to help create jobs. I think that we have overlooked the energy sector as a job producing sector. I'm there fighting each and every day to make sure that we bring jobs out of the energy sector. And there's so many jobs that are available. And I've gotten awards for some of the things that I've done in terms of the energy, making sure that the Department of Energy and that the energy companies, that they all respond to the African American community in regards to bringing jobs. We want the energy, climate bill, all that. We want them to produce jobs in our community.
Thank you. Thank you. Robert, yes.
Thank you so much for that question. It's a good one in terms of making sure that we're thinking about what we want to do when we get into Congress. So I myself would love to be on the Committee on Energy and Commerce so we can pass a Green New Deal. And I thank you so much, Congressman. So you heard it here first. We want to pass a Green New Deal. And we want to do it with the help of the Sunrise Movement. And that's why I want to be on the Energy and Commerce Committee. And I also want to do exactly what you did, Congressman, when you brought the congressional panel to Kennedy King College on the south side of Chicago to investigate gun violence as a public health epidemic. And I want to make sure that the panelists represent the group that's disproportionately impacted by gun violence. So thank you so much for your service, Congressman. I deeply, deeply respect you. I want to make sure that we're actually sustainably changing our communities. So appreciate you.
Thank you.
If I were elected, I would like to join the Committee of Oversight and Reform, particularly the Subcommittee for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. Something that is very problematic here in the south side of Chicago is the way in which racial profiling runs rampant in law enforcement. I find it curious that Congressman Rush endorsed Mike Bloomberg, who is the king of stop and frisk, because this is something that has disproportionately impacted the lives of people in our district. Something that I'm championing is requiring law enforcement to collect race and ethnicity statistics for everybody that they stop, seize, and arrest, and require local federal law enforcement agencies receiving that federal money to do the same. Something else that I would champion on that committee is reducing the militarization of law enforcement, reforming federal civil asset forfeiture laws, and restoring rights to formerly incarcerated persons. I would also like to join the Judiciary Committee because there are 3 federal laws that come to mind that are disastrous and that are destroying the lives of the people here in the south side of Chicago. EDPA, which is tying the hands of federal courts who wish to provide some form of relief to people who are wrongfully incarcerated, wrongfully convicted, serving life sentences for crimes that no longer warrant life sentences. I would want to make sure that every new law that is passed is applied retroactively so we can actually effectuate meaning to the phrase equal protection under the law.
Time.
I would also like to...
Time.
I would also really implore...
Finish your last sentence, and then Congressman Rush, you'll have a chance to respond.
Implore us to consider removing the doctrine of qualified immunity for law enforcement officers because there's no reason for any law enforcement officer...
Thank you.
Okay,
we're over. Congressman Rush. Congressman Rush, would you like to respond?
Yeah. Sarah, you keep you keep hitting me with these drive-bys, and I want to let you know, before you can drive by, you gotta know how to drive. All right. And so, let me just tell you succinctly, because you put it out there. I'm supporting Michael Bloom for president because 1, he can beat Trump. 2, he has a plan. He's the only one who has a plan to build an economy in the black community. 1 million new black homeowners in 10 years. 100,000 new black businesses in 10 years. All right.
Thank you.
He's got an economic plan that none of the other candidates have even
It's time.
remotely referred to.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Our next question comes from Michael Glotzer, who's a member of Indivisible Chicago Southside.
Good evening. So in order to represent their constituents, it's incumbent upon members of Congress to meet with and hear from their constituents. From searching Congressman Rush's website, I was only able to find announcements for town halls in 2003, 5, 9, and 14. I'd like to know how Congressman Rush and the other candidates plan to remain attentive to the needs and priorities of the people of the 1st District.
Thank you.
Yeah, what you call, thank you for the question. What you call town hall meetings, I call stakeholders meetings, all right? And I've had stakeholders meetings on a variety of issues over the years. I have had stakeholders meetings on missing and murdered women. I've had on the utilities, immigration forum. I've had stakeholders meetings around housing, around property taxes, around veterans affairs, around grant, teaching people how to get grants. I've had a stakeholders meeting on the South Lakeshore erosion of the lakefront. I have stakeholders meetings. You might call them town hall meetings. I call them stakeholders meetings, and I have a lot of them.
Thank you.
And it's not the only way I communicate with my district. I communicate with my district in a variety of ways, including at Mariano's at 39th Street when I'm out shopping.
Like I stated earlier today, our campaign has been going for about a year and 2 months now. And throughout this time, I've gone around the community from Bronzeville all the way down to Manhattan, talking directly to our constituents, learning about what goes on in their community, learning what they care about. And I can promise to commit myself to making sure that I do that as member of the United States House of Representatives. I had a town hall back in Auburn Gresham a few months ago. It was actually a reverse town hall in which I actually listened to the community directly. And a teacher began to talk to me directly about having lost a student to gun violence. And that touched my heart because sometimes in politics, some of this stuff can become numb and we repeat the same things over and over again. So learning directly from our constituents and hearing the stories, it keeps us fresh, and it makes sure that we're staying connected and rooted in what spurs the true vision and true passion in our community. So thank you.
Since the day that I launched my campaign on October 17th, I have kept an open channel of communication with all of my constituents. Every time I receive a comment on Facebook, every time I receive a criticism on Facebook, I always take the time to address that person directly, ask them, would you like to set up a phone call? Would you like to meet for coffee and discuss your concerns? Because I believe that my role as an elected official is to be somebody who echoes the voices of my constituents 100% of the time. My job as an elected official is not there to perpetuate my own interests and needs. It's to be a voice for my constituents. So I will always keep a channel of communication open between myself and my constituents. I will hold 2 mandatory town hall meetings every single year at least. And as I've been running my campaign, I've been going around the district. I've spoken to countless fire departments and law enforcement agencies, and every single time I go speak in one of these agencies, I ask them, if your department had an extra $100 million, what would you do with that first? To sort of ascertain what the most compelling problems are facing these individual agencies. And unanimously, the answer has been increasing funding for suicide and overdose prevention. And I found that to be pretty alarming, and it tells me where we really need to start when we're starting to align our priorities. Okay.
Thank you. So the next question has come up in a few of your answers, but this is a chance to address the topic directly, and it was submitted via our online survey for questions. Do you favor reparations for African American people whose ancestors were enslaved in the US? If no, why not? If yes, what would your plan be for reparations, and how would you gain support from your fellow members of Congress? We'll start this round with Robert Evans.
Absolutely, wholeheartedly support reparations. We actually just received the endorsement from Marianne Williamson, former presidential candidate who campaigned on reparations. And again, our plan for reparations includes debt relief to the American descendants of slavery. Look, if you can track the wealth generated, the dollars generated from slavery, then you can also still track the harm done by slavery and Jim Crow and bombing Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I wholeheartedly support reparations. It is the way we achieve economic development in the Black and brown communities. So absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you. Sarah?
I also support reparations wholeheartedly. I think that it's necessary to rectify the economic imbalances resulting from slavery and Jim Crow, but also, as I talked about in a previous answer, modern day slavery and the new Jim Crow. I mean, the reality is that we have people in prison making 15 cents an hour, leaving jail with nowhere to go. Also because mass incarceration has desecrated communities of color. We have a system of law enforcement that disproportionately targets people of color and leaves them without any opportunities for economic prosperity.
It's not time. You have more time.
Okay. I actually, when I was in DC this summer, I attended a hearing on reparations. It was the very first hearing that Congress held on Bill H.R. 40, and people flew in from all around the world for this hearing. I mean, the room was packed. Celebrities showed up. They were talking about how if reparations were to be enacted, how they would allocate the funding. And it was a very insightful meeting. And out of what district in America is more deserving and could better benefit from reparations than the 1st Congressional District? We have the highest population of American descendants of slaves. And like I said before, we've been desecrated by economic imbalances dating back 70, 80 years. It's not just a matter.
Thank you. I understand.
Curiously, the only member of the Congressional Black Caucus who was absent from that meeting was Congressman Rush. Again, there's an absence in leadership.
I'm not new to this issue of reparation. My good friend, the late John Conyers, I was with him when he first introduced the bill. I've been a supporter, a co-sponsor of the bill since 1997. All right, so and also, as a son of an ex-slave, I understand what slavery was all about. I understand the problems, the residual effects. I understand the economic issues that we are confronted with. I understand when they reneged on the 40 acres and a mule, that created a dual economic system where blacks, who they consider us being, they call us the base. Well, I'm going to say, yeah, we might be the base, and we're also living in the basement. All right, and we need to have, and the basement is unfinished, and we need to finish the basement, or we're not going to be your base for economic prosperity anymore. I am supportive of the reparations bill. I've been a vigorous battler for it, and just because I wasn't at the whatever you say, Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next question is from Laura Shea, a University of Chicago student.
Hello. Today, so far, we've talked about a couple issues from housing, criminal justice, environmental justice, healthcare access, and gun violence. And what these all have in common is poverty, which is a huge problem in this district because of our history of segregation and also the loss of manufacturing jobs. Excuse me. This weekend, we celebrated Martin Luther King's birthday, and Dr. Martin Luther King said that the solution to poverty is to abolish it directly by a guaranteed income. Test runs of universal basic income have showed that it encourages people to stay in school, reduces crime, stress, and oppression, and also stimulates local economies. Would you support bipartisan legislature for universal basic income?
Thank you. We'll start with Sarah Gadd.
Yes, the south side of Chicago carries the second highest Black unemployment rate in the country, and we have 70% of families here living below the poverty line. I've said this many times before, one of the most common pathways into our criminal justice system is lack of opportunity. And so a lot of times we see people committing crimes which are actually really just acts of survival. I see crime as a breaking point. It's when people who are forced to make tough decisions that many of us aren't forced to make, and they land us somewhere where we never come out better than where we started. So I think that a universal basic income is absolutely necessary to improve the quality of life for my for my constituents. So that's that's something that I would absolutely support. I think it's.
You got more time.
Yeah. No, it's okay. You can go ahead.
Congressman Rush.
you know, I want to see the bill. I don't want to commit to a bill that I have not seen. So if it's a bill that's been introduced, I like to see the bill so I know exactly what's in the bill. I don't want to support it or not. But I do support the principle of universal living wage. And let me just take this moment, this time. When we lost U.S. Steel, then the economy of the South Side in the first district went to the bottom. And we have not been able to replace it. Recently, though, I've discovered that in Will County, which is a part of the first district, we have the largest intermodal facility in the world. Tomorrow morning at 7:45, I'm going to Kansas City, on a plane to Kansas City, to look at a sister intermodal system, because if that intermodal system can be fully developed and fully operational, it will create thousands of jobs for the South Side and for the First Congressional District. The only thing, and I want everybody, because I want you to help me with this, the only thing that prevents $1 billion investment at the Compass Intermodal Facility is a little bridge that the state, and it's going to be built with no public funds. And all that we want to do is get the governor to give it the okay, and we will have that intermodal facility that will create more meaningful jobs, full-time jobs, and give everybody a livable wage.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I support UBI in spirit because I understand how that would alleviate poverty in our community across the 1st Congressional District. But one of the major cons of UBI is it will take away supplemental federal resources from poor folks. It will take away child assistance programs. It will take away Medicaid for poor folks. So though I support the UBI in spirit, I don't believe that it will work for a community like ours, especially if we don't get reparations first. We need reparations before we have UBI.
Thank you. We have reached our last question. I will be reading this again, another question submitted through our online survey. The 1994 crime bill made people in prison ineligible for Pell Grants, which eviscerated college programs in prisons across the country. Do you support legislation reinstating Pell Grant eligibility to incarcerated students? And do you support a clean version of the bill with no eligibility restrictions for people with long or life sentences or specific offenses? I think Sarah.
I absolutely support restoring access to Pell Grants in correctional facilities. When I was in DC this summer, I actually planned a lobbying day for restoring access to higher education in correctional facilities. A RAND Corporation study found that correctional institutions that have access to higher education see a reduction in recidivism and violent crime by 44%, and every single dollar invested in correctional education yields $5 in future returns for offsetting recidivism. I met a nice young man when I was in DC named Stanley Andres, and he's actually going to be coming to our job fair that my campaign is hosting this Saturday for the reentry community. At our first job fair, we just did a local mixer to have people who just got out of prison and local businesses in a room just to show them, hey, we're still human and we just still deserve a chance. We ended up having 27 people employed on the spot, leaving with jobs. So we're doing our second one, January 25th, and my friend Stanley, who started a program called From Prison Cells to PhDs. It's a program that helps people transform their lives after prison through education. He's gonna be coming out and talking to the crowd about how he was able to transform his life through education. He's put 175 prisoners through college through his program, and out of those 175 people, only 2 of them recidivated. When you compare that to the 83% recidivism rate, that's a big reduction.
Thank you very much. Congressman Rush.
Thank you for the question. I do support the restoration of the Pell Grants to prisoners, and I supported across the board. And even more so than that, in September this year, at the Congressional Black Caucus Legislative Forum, I had a panel discussion and a preview of the documentary that Ken Burns created, Prison College Behind Walls. And Ken Burns was a participant in my on my panel discussion. And just last Thursday, at a breakfast that I normally attend, the Aspen Institute, we had Max Kenner and the program. Max Kenner is the president or executive director of the president of the College Behind Bars program. And Max Kenner is a friend, is the son of a real good friend of mine. So I'm working very vigorously to help restore the Pell Grant.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. 100% would support restoring access to the Pell Grant to formerly incarcerated students. Now we're talking about the 1994 crime bill. Congressman Rush voted for the 1994 crime bill, which exacerbated the vicious cycle of poverty and violence, and he apologized for it. Congressman Rush also supported a Chicago mayoral candidate who said that we should spend $50 million on drone surveillance on the southwest side of Chicago, further exacerbating the vicious cycle of poverty and violence. And now the congressman is supporting Michael Bloomberg, someone who practically invented stop and frisk and disproportionately impacted black folks. The congressman has a history of being tough on crime, in a time in which we need to be compassionate, in a time in which we need to rehabilitate our formerly incarcerated folks. We absolutely need compassion and courage in our time. Absolutely.
Congressman Rush, if you want to respond.
Let me just say this. I have been a member of this community, a member of this district. I've been on the front line of all kinds of issues. And the one thing that I've learned in terms is trying something different. If you continue to do the same old thing, then you're gonna get the same old result. So I'm always looking. That's the reason why, in terms of on the matter of guns, I'm the only one in Congress right now who's advocating taser research for a gun. I think the taser is the solution to a big part of the gun problem here in our nation, because tasers are much more effective and they're not deadly. So
Thank you.
I try to look for.
Thank you. We have done pretty well on time, and so I know there are probably a lot of things you haven't had a chance to respond to. We are going to extend closing statements to a full 3 minutes. If you would like to take that 3 minutes, we will go back to the original opening statement order, where we'll begin with Congressman Rush.
Well, thank you so very much. On the issue of violence in our community, guns, I don't like to discuss this publicly, but I have a son who was killed, shot down on the south side of the city of Chicago. And this is something that personally affects me. It's something I've been involved in even before he was killed. This wanton murder on our streets. And I am committed, not will be committed, but I am committed each and every day to try to deal with what I consider the economic foundation or genesis for these social dysfunctions and social aberrations that we're suffering from in the African American community. So if I find someone who, notwithstanding, look, let me just say this. Everybody that's running for president has apologized to the black community for something that they did. Every one of them. All right? And so I really want to try to look beyond that, accept their apology, hope that they repent, all right, and hope that we can work on real issues in the future that concern the African American community. And those mostly begin with economic development, jobs, 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 business, 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 capital, capital, capital. These are the things that make me get up in the morning when I can find opportunities to go and try to work on these particular issues.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I oftentimes say this throughout the campaign, and I'll say it again. As I go around the district and the country advocating for gun violence prevention, criminal justice reform, environmental justice, healthcare, upward mobility for people of color, I acknowledge that I'm not the first person and I'm not a part of the first generation to fight for these things. But what I will be is the last generation to have to fight for these things. So, Congressman, I thank you so much for your tenure in the United States House of Representatives. I thank you so much for your years of activism in Chicago. What our campaign is about is making this the very last generation to be faced with everyday gun violence by addressing gun violence at its root causes. And at this time, we need compassion and we need love and we need resilience. Because like I said, 100,000 Americans are directly impacted by gun violence every year. In the next 10 years, this will mean 1 million Americans will have been directly impacted. This is an injustice. This is one of the greatest crises that we have within our time. And we can end it. And we have to end our love affair of guns. And though I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms, we have a responsibility to also arm ourselves with compassion and love and comprehension. And in the same way that someone in Will County that loves their guns want to protect their families, we want to protect our communities. So that way my kids, your kids, don't have to live in a world in which they fear walking to school or going to Walmart. And our young people can participate in gym classes and math classes and not in active shooting drills. So that's what this campaign is about. This campaign is about peace and prosperity in our communities. And I'm happy to have received more endorsements than almost anybody, actually anybody on this stage, both local in this current election, on anybody. I don't think you got me beat in the 27 years. But in this current election, being endorsed by groups like the Sunrise Movement, the People for Bernie Sanders, Our Revolution, DUH. So we're so thankful for their support. And with that, we're going to win this election and change our communities once and for all. So thank you so much. Hope to have your vote on March 17, 2020.
Thank you.
And visit our website at robertemmons.org. Thank you.
Like I said in my opening statement, I was actually approached to run for Congress. It wasn't in my initial plan. I had actually accepted a job after graduating law school, but after I was approached, I reflected on the decision very carefully. And like I said, I decided to go to DC for the summer to see what Congress was like, to see if I could be an effective voice for our district in Congress, to see if I could be a capable leader who was capable of affecting change where it matters most, where laws are made. I've said before, at the end of the day, I found that I was doing much of the advocating in these hearings for our district. I attended countless hearings, topics ranging from environmental justice to prison reform, restoring access to Pell Grants in correctional facilities, healthcare, education. What I came out of the summer really learning was that the American people are not the priorities of our current lawmakers. If there was one thing that was made abundantly clear to me in my 3.5 months spending time on Capitol Hill is that we're the furthest things from their minds. I mean, I was amazed to hear the things that were being discussed in these rooms. I was at the first counter-narcotic strategy hearing for the opioid crisis. The opioid crisis is something that we've all felt the effects of. I've lost 8 friends to opioid overdoses in the last 6 years. And when I heard a reporter ask Senator Mike Pompeo, what are you going to do to address the synthetic opioid crisis? His response was more interdictions at the southern border. I was mortified. I was mortified that our senior-most lawmakers, our senior-most members of Congress are drafting a response to the deadliest public health crisis in modern history without even knowing where the poison is coming from. I mean, that's serious. Another thing that stuck out in my mind was the absence of leadership. Mr. Rush has talked about having the distinction for many things. He also has the distinction for missing more votes than any member of Congress between 2007 and 2015. There's no excuse for leaving your district without a voice for over a decade. And these were votes that are very pertinent to our district. I mean, these are things that are very pertinent to our district. Issues, gun violence, healthcare, education. I didn't even see Congressman Rush at the hearing for reparations, where people flew in all around the world for this hearing. If there was one thing that was abundantly clear to me, was that we do not have representation in DC. I would be honored to represent the 1st Congressional District. I feel like my life experiences and the experiences of the people in my district, we resonate together. We've been in this fight together since day one. They've been, I mean, I've fallen down more times than I can count, and they've been there to pick me up every step of the way. And now I'm proud and excited to be in a position where I can vouch for them on a greater level. And my time up?
Yes.
Okay.
You can have 30 seconds to, since there was a, yes.
Sarah, you need, when you start operating and telling things from your own alternative universe, you ought to get your facts right. Mike Pompeo is the Secretary of State and not a legislator. So I don't know how you could have asked him the question.
I never said I asked him anything. I never said I asked him anything.
Let me say this.
I didn't ask him anything.
My two events had an effect on my voting record. First of all was my own bout with cancer. I was fighting for my life, and for a long period of time, I had cancer right here at the University of Chicago. That effect, I couldn't fight cancer and vote in the House at the same time. And the second thing, and you might not have had tragedies in your life, but I have. My late wife was very ill for 2 years. And prior to her illness, serious illness, I saw a leading member of Congress, an African American, on the floor in the well. Someone came up to him and said, "Your wife have a few hours to live." He was on the floor of the House. I saw him running out to get in the car and try to get to the airport so he can be by his wife's side. I said right there and there, if that same thing occurred to me, if my wife was ill, needed me by her side, then that's where I was going to be. So
why would you?
And those are the only two.
Why would you encourage? Why would you encourage Bernie Sanders to run? Why would you encourage Bernie Sanders to drop out of the presidential race for health complications then? That's what I don't understand.
Thank you.
That's.
Just in the interest of time, Robert, if you'd like 30 extra seconds. So, so I want to thank, do you have?
Real quick.
Okay. Please, we're almost, I know, thank you so much for being quiet this time. I want to give, just in the interest of time, I want to give Robert a few seconds to respond before we wrap up the formal portion of our program.
Thank you. And look. In this moment, we face great challenges like climate change and gun violence prevention and a criminal justice system. In this moment, we need unity. So I want to end on a positive note, if possible, if that's okay with you guys. All right, can we all? I do this in town halls all across the district. Can we all stand up? All right, can we put our peace signs in the air? Thank you so much. And I want you to repeat after me. Peace is possible. Peace is possible. I know that peace is possible. And in this moment, I also want to acknowledge that in this district, we were taught to respect our elders and we were taught to make sure that we acknowledged that we were standing on the shoulders of giants. And those shoulders have taught us that when our feet get weary and it feels like the tears are never going to stop flowing, that hope is possible, and peace is possible, and prosperity is possible. So I want you all to look around the room, and whenever it feels like the dark days are never going to end, I want you to remember this. Even though we were arguing and we have our differences, it's because of you. It's because of our community. And that's what our campaign is about. Our campaign's mantra is we are the solution together. And it's not predicated on the idea that one person is going to solve our problems. It's predicated on the idea that there is strength in us and togetherness. And that's what the people of the 1st Congressional District represent. And that's what we're going to have in DC. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I want to thank all of the candidates for coming and answering questions and being engaged with us here with Indivisible Chicago South Side. I want to thank everybody who submitted a question. I want to thank everybody that came. And the candidates, for as long as they can, will be here to talk to the people here. Again, thank you so much, and have a good night.